5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hi, we'd like to welcome everybody to our last conference session of this year's virtual UAA conference. Today you'll get to hear from a wonderful speaker, Annette Peterson from Utah State University, on the Science of Resiliency. Just a couple of housekeeping things to remind you. At 1 o'clock today we have our keynote speaker, Mitchell Culver, who will be closing us out, as well as announcing this year's Academic Advisor of the Year. So we look forward to seeing you guys in the next hour, and we'll turn it over to you, Annette.
All right, well, thank you. I'm excited to be here, and thanks everyone for attending. I sure appreciate your help and your support. So just a little bit about myself. I'm Annette Peterson, and there has been really quite a bit of buzz about resilience and the efficacy of its application in a person's life. In this presentation, we will discuss if the science actually supports the theory of resiliency. And I will.
I'm an academic advisor at Snow College and a UAA committee member who will be moderating the discussion. Our 12 p.m.
Okay. So I'll tell you a little bit about where I work. I work at Utah State University. We're located at Logan, Utah, and this is a picture of Utah State University. We're surrounded by mountains. Our students have a beautiful place to study, learn, exchange ideas, and to achieve their goals. I work at Utah State University in exploratory advising, and I work with the students in the focus area of social sciences and human services. I have worked closely with students, and I have found that one essential quality for students to succeed is the ability to develop resiliency. And that's where my interest in resiliency kind of occurred. And I attended some presentations in Region 10 when I first started and in our UAA conference. And I was just so impressed with the idea of resiliency, and I've chosen to study it just because I find it so interesting. Here's a quote: "Our greatest glory is not in never failing, but in rising every time we fall." And it's by Confucius. And I find this quote so inspiring, and it rings true to resilience. Have you ever wondered why some people remain calm in the face of adversity and others crumble? People who are able to effectively navigate the highs and lows of life have what psychologists call resilience, or the ability to effectively bounce back from adversity. Whenever a person comes across a difficult situation, they have two choices. They can either let their emotions get the best of them and they can become paralyzed by fear, or they can uplift themselves from the negative and transform pain into possibility. And I really, really love that idea of transforming pain into possibility. Life is not easy. Even if you consider yourself a happy person, it is inevitable that each of us and our students will encounter challenges in our lives. These experiences may affect us, but they don't have to break us. According to the APA, resilience is a process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. And the stress could come from family and relationship problems. It could be serious health problems or workplace and financial stressors. And of course, we work in the academic setting, so it could be academic issues like academic standing, failing a test, failing a class, and so forth. No, sorry, just, okay. And of course, having technical issues also. But being resilient does not mean that a person doesn't experience difficulty or stress. And sometimes we confuse thinking that being happy or positive will solve all of our problems and so forth. That's not necessarily the case. And resiliency doesn't mean that we have to be happy all the time or anything. In fact, emotional pain and sadness are common in people who have suffered major adversity or trauma in their lives. We know that there's pain and issues that happen when we run into traumatic events. In fact, the road to resilience is likely to involve considerable emotional distress. Positive psychology aims Positive psychology and resilience training really go hand in hand. Much of the positive psychology actually is part of resilience training, but positive psychology aims to discover what makes us thrive. It looks at questions like, what contributes to happiness? What are the health effects of positive emotions? And what habits and actions can build personal resilience? So far, they found some wonderful things. For example, it's well documented that negative emotions like anger, anxiety, sadness can impact us in negative ways, such as triggering our stress response or contributing to chronic stress, making us more susceptible to cardiovascular disease. But we've also found that positive psychology research has now found that positive emotions can aid health by undoing the physical reactivity that can lead to these problems. So positive psychology and resilience training can actually turn it around. Also, it can lead to habits and actions that will make people more resilient. So that is a wonderful thing. Okay, growth mindset. A growth mindset means that you believe your intelligence and talents can be developed over time. So you're not just born with your abilities. You can actually make an impact, you can improve it, and so forth. A fixed mindset means that you believe intelligence is fixed. So you think, oh, I was only born with my intelligence, I can't become smarter, or my talents, I was only born with it, so I can't ever improve it. So if you're not good at something, you might not believe you'll ever be good at it. An important part of resilience training in positive psychology is this mindset. And I like this quotation, it's people are made, not born. The growth mindset explains why it's not just our talent that helps us to success, but how we approach our goals. Mindset refers to the belief that we hold about our abilities, whether we think they are set in stone or we can actually change it. So our mindset plays a major role in whether we reach our potential or we plateau. This mindset idea is based on the research by Professor Carol Dweck at Stanford University and has the backing of neuroscience. It is one of the foundations of positive psychology that we can learn optimism, develop our strengths, and we can grow our happiness. Plus, we can gain skills to become more resilient. So all of it goes hand in hand with the idea that we can actually grow and improve. Those who adopt a growth mindset are more likely to embrace lifelong learning. So people who have a growth mindset are more curious. They can learn things and have skills and so forth. They believe intelligence can be improved. So schooling, education, trying new ideas, asking for help, all of this will help them improve their life. They're also more willing to put in more effort to learn. So hard work, they know that hard work will pay off. Time, if you put in the time, you will increase your skills, effort, and so forth. So think about this in the a school setting, how great this is for students. If they do their homework, they're going to get better in their classes, they're going to learn the material and so forth. They believe in effort, that effort leads to mastery. So practice makes perfect. You can become better. So sports, if you may not have the skills or the talent at first, but if you keep working on it. So those are some great things about that. Effort leads to mastery. Believe that failures are just temporary setbacks. They don't let it define who they are. So one of the great things that I like when I see a student who maybe hasn't done well, they come to me and say, hey, how can I become better? What could I do? Do you have any strategies that I can do better? And so they don't ever think, oh gosh, I'm dumb, I'm a failure because I can't do this. Now, I have seen students who maybe define themselves because of a bad grade, and I try to fight that as much as possible because we don't want them to define who they are by a grade. People with growth mindset, they view feedback as a source of information. So they're seeking out, they're trying to get mentors and so forth, and they find it a way to improve themselves and improve their situations. They willingly embrace challenges. And this is a huge one. They're not afraid to try new things, or they find excitement in overcoming challenges. Whereas sometimes people are like, oh, I don't want to look stupid, so I'm not going to try something, and so forth. So those are kind of like the contrast between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. So just the way they view things. View other success as a source of inspiration. So people with this growth mindset are thinking, oh, if this person can do it and they did it by practicing, or, oh my gosh, they put in the time, then they view that as inspiration. Whereas sometimes if you have the fixed mindset, you might view it as, oh, they're my competition. They're going after me. I can't be as good as them, or there's that comparison opportunity. So if we can teach students this growth mindset, that will help them become better people. And also view feedback as an opportunity to learn. Instead of a criticism, they're thinking, oh, this is a chance that I can become better, and so forth. Okay, so on these next two slides, notice there's a lot of writing, and I come from a professional communication background. A lot of writing on slides is not so good, but this is probably the most important part of my presentation because it shows the science of resiliency. These are all studies and in regard to resiliency. Does it work? And they have a different settings, different people's different demographics. And what is really, really interesting about it, the data is actually, it actually illustrates that the science, data, and studies on resiliency do in fact show the significance and importance of resilience, and that it can have an impact on people in their lives. Now, I will have to say, it could be slides and slides. It could be the rest of my presentation, all the different studies. The body of work is increasing significantly, and it's showing that it does have an impact. But of course, that would be really long and boring. But I will read some of these titles of work to show the variety of the demographics and situations and how it has applied to resiliency. And then maybe I'll showcase a couple of examples. So stress management and resilience training, SMART program to decrease stress and enhance resilience in breast cancer survivors. Feasibility and acceptability of a resilience training program for intensive care unit nurses. Building resilience for future adversity, a systematic review of interventions and non-clinical samples of adults. And that's in psychiatry. Resilience training in the workplace from 2003 to 2014, a systematic review, Journal of Occupational and Organizational Psychology. Abridged mindfulness, intervention to support wellness in first-year medical students. The effect of mindfulness-based therapy on anxiety and depression, and meta-analytic review. Support for spouses of post-deployment service members, preventing the development of depression at work, a systematic review and meta-analysis of universal interventions in the workplace. Mindfulness goes to work, impact of an online workplace intervention, Journal of Occupational and Environmental Medicine, evaluating the effectiveness of enhancing resilience in human service professionals using a retreat-based mindfulness with meta training program, a randomized control trial. Okay, those were mouthfuls, but again, the list would go on and on and on and on. And so this is just a sampling to give you an idea that there's different studies and different demographics and people and situations and where they've been studying. So I want to showcase a couple of them just to kind of give you an idea of what people did and what they were studying and so forth. The stress management and resilience training program to decrease stress and enhance resilience among breast cancer survivors. This one, patients were diagnosed with breast cancer, and because of their diagnosis, a lot of them, their quality of life was going down. Their worries about financial, their health, their mortality, and so forth. So they wanted to study to see if they could help breast cancers patients, if they had training in resiliency, whether that would help them in their quality of life. So they divided the group into two different groups. One group, they didn't do anything except for asking them what their exercise routine was. And then the other group ended up having, they created a program in where they would teach them, and they had 2 90-minute group training sessions. And they learned about mindfulness, about resiliency, and so forth. And then they also had the opportunity to have a brief individual session that they could talk to mentors and people who could teach them about things or questions in regard to their specific situation. And then they had 3 follow-up phone calls in regard to that. And what was interesting is that they were tested at 12 weeks. They were all given, it was measured by the Connor-Davidson Resilience Scale. They were all given the scale and they had to report on it. The Perceived Stress Cycle Scale, the Smith Anxiety Scale, and then the Linear Analog Self-Assessment Scale. And the results were huge. It was a statistically significant improvement in resilience, perceived stress, anxiety, and overall quality of life at 12 weeks. So they studied at the very beginning and then they did it in 12 weeks. And there was absolutely no difference in the control group. So that was interesting. And again, that was a group of people who were suffering with their health. They were diagnosed with it and they had that. Another program, actually it was kind of in the medical field also, it was on the feasibility and acceptability of a resilience training program for intensive care unit nurses. Now in this group, they see a lot of trauma. They have to work fast, there's emergency situations, and there's a high turnover rate, plus it's very, very emotional. And what they did pre and post testing, and they were tested on resilience, anxiety, depression, PTSD, and burnout syndrome. And their treatment was they had a 2-day workshop in resilience, and they were introduced to the idea of a resiliency program. They were trained in writing about their experiences. So they had someone who was trained in the ability to express their emotions and so forth. They had an event-triggered counseling session. So if, for example, a nurse ended up having a patient die on them, they were watching over or caring for them, then they were given a personal session, or maybe they had to have a end of life discussion with a family member, or maybe they had to perform an emergency CPR trying to revive a patient. They would have a session dealing with resiliency. They also had mindfulness-based stress reduction exercises. So they learned how to use mindfulness, and it might be breathing, things like that. And then they were given a 3-month membership at a gym, so they could actually measure their exercise routines and so forth. Groups were assigned. They had one group that didn't receive any treatment whatsoever, and then they had another group that did all 3 of these different interventions. Again, the scales that were used on this one was the Connor-Davidson Resilience Scale, the PTSD Diagnostic Scale, Hospital Anxiety and Depression Scale, and the Maslach Burnout Inventory. And they had this one measured, they had a significant decrease in PTSD syndrome score after intervention. So it had an impact on traumatic disorder. And then one last one, just to give you another one. This one was on support for spouses of post-deployment service members. And as you notice, really the demographics are quite different. They're different groups. But on this one, spouses of service members who served in Iraq or Afghanistan were randomized for support groups. So they were put in different support groups. They attended support groups. They had educational webinars, and they had groups that would talk about just usual self-care kind of things. Participants who participated in all 3 study arms improved over time. And this is really interesting, and I kind of want to highlight, despite dealing with care challenges, because a lot of the service members had like maybe destroyed limbs and so forth, or injured. Despite dealing with all these care challenges, all participants attributed benefit to self-efficacy because of the training. And so that was an interesting finding. So, so how did these, now one thing about all these studies, and again, the list could go on, maybe I would say they had different methods of measuring resiliency. They did it in different ways of as far as training modules, lesson, testing applications. So maybe one thing about this study of resiliency is the fact that there's not one definition of resiliency that all of the groups used, and they did different ways. Some had individual therapy, other people had group lessons, webinars, and so forth. So that and they also measured it differently. So the pluses is there's definitely study on it. The minuses and negatives, maybe they're not all the same. But things that the science teaches us are resilience can actually be taught. Resilience can be measured and evaluated. So there's different ways of doing it. It works across various situations and demographics, and overcoming obstacles is a life skill. So in all these different areas and situations, it's a life skill and it's a transferable skill. So you can be taught in one situation, but it can be applied to different areas of your life. So the science is saying it's definitely worth looking into. So moving on, just looking at my time. So there's in a 2018-2019 Healthy Minds studies, it found that 75% of current college students say they need help for emotional or mental health problems. And this is, I'm going to quote this: "There is a mental health crisis on America's college campuses. Increasingly, today's students are lonely. More and more of them are anxious. Many are experiencing depression, and that's leading them to college counseling centers at an ever-increasing rate." And this is where the 75% college students need help for emotional or mental support. And of course, this doesn't even deal. This was 2019, 2020, 2018, 2019. So that doesn't even deal with 2020 or 2021. And of course, we know that there was definitely some physical isolation. There was worries about our health and so forth. But going on, most colleges and universities are determined to support their students so that they can succeed in their studies. We want our students to be successful. We want them to learn. We want them to achieve their goals and so forth. But demands on counseling centers are becoming so great that it's hard for them to meet students and their counseling needs. So part of the solution is working to develop resilience among our incoming college students. Now we know that the science of resiliency actually works, but are schools using resiliency? How and what methods are schools of higher education using and doing? And what training do we have? So we're going to highlight some of the things that universities are doing in education. Pennsylvania, they created the Pennsylvania Resiliency Program. They have evidence-based training, they have workshops, and they do these workshops it's available to universities, to the military, professional sports program, and first responders. This is one of the longest running programs. And basically what they do workshops. And again, talking about how they've done it for a really long time. They share that decades of empirical studies indicate that the program increases well-being and optimism, reduces and prevents depression, anxiety, and results in fewer substance abuse and mental health diagnoses, and improves physical health. Don't we want all of this? But they've been doing it for quite some time, and they have empirical, and they're very, very proud of their evidence-based and empirical studies in regard to that. Stanford, they were one of the pioneers in the study of resiliency, and Carol Dweck comes from Stanford. And originally it had its own program, and it was called, they had their own center, and they had a program called the Resilience Project. And what they did, they were trying to normalize setbacks and help students reflect on and learn from their failures. You know, it's hard to get into Stanford, and they were finding that students, they had worked all their lives to get into Stanford, but then when they got there, they were afraid to fail. They were afraid that they couldn't succeed. They were having a lot of mental crises. And so they were trying to say, hey, you know what? Part of learning is having failures. And they ended up creating a program, which was called Stanford I Screwed Up. And it was a huge program, and where they would have kind of like a gala night, somewhat like an Oscars. And they would have students, undergraduates, graduate students, faculty, staff share their stories of failure. And it turned out to be a really big thing. And you can find a whole bunch of the videos on YouTube and so forth. And it turned out a way to normalize that failures happen, but you can learn and you can become stronger from them. In fact, in one of the episodes, there was a PhD student who recounted that he had a video game addiction that sabotaged his work as a researcher. One was kicked out of his own startup because of his inability to collaborate. Another who couldn't face the pressure of school took some time off, but each of them found a way forward. And as the evening came to end, it became clear that failure is not only a normal part of life, but it can also be a source of inspiration too. So this was a very popular thing. Some years ago, this was huge, and I was doing some research on it and found this, and I was like so impressed with the program. Now they've taken it down, and I was like, what? How could they do this? But what they've done, they've changed the focus of it, and now it's a fully integrated part of their learning center. So incoming freshmen and faculty are trying to incorporate resiliency. So instead of a separate program, they're trying to incorporate it into their learning programs of all their departments and colleges. So, which is kind of I actually love this idea that they're normalizing it. It's actually just part of the curriculum. So that has been a significant change. But a lot of schools have really liked it and have adopted this idea of Stanford, I screwed up, only they have their own versions of it. UT Austin, they have created a Thrive at UT. It's a free app that students can use to integrate resiliency tactics into their everyday life, and it covers 8 topics. So to just tell you a little bit about it, this Thrive app is to help busy students live their very, very best lives. Thrive helps students make small changes in their routine, so they just work on small little things, but they have powerful long-term impacts. And it was actually created with the help and input of faculty, staff, students, and it took quite a few years to develop. But it consists of 8 topics, and topics are community, gratitude, self-compassion, mindfulness, mindset, thoughts, moods, and purpose. And in each area of the app, there's an inspirational quote, a short video of UT students sharing their own story, and helpful information, and an interactive activity. Which something that's really nice about it, it is incorporating technology, and you don't have to go to a center to do it. Students can actually access it, and yet it has different little things that they can do, and also an actual activity. So on this slide, Harvard was one of 10 founding members of the Resilience Consortium, and this was also Stanford was part of it, and most of the 10 founding members were actually Ivy League schools, and they felt that it was really, really important to study resiliency because, again, they find it. Now, what's interesting about it is interest was so high that membership was opened and now has 600 plus members from 360 institutions in 45 states and 17 countries. And it's become so big that it's actually now become its own entity, and it is now known as the Academic Resilience Consortium. So it's their own entity, and what they do is they let participating institutions independently address how they're going to deal with issues of resiliency in their own campus, giving their own unique resources and interests in student populations, but they are there as a resource, and the institutions and members come together and they share their practices, what they're doing, and so forth. And basically, this is kind of their goal is today's students encounter, and I'll quote, today's students encounter unprecedented challenges in their lives and work that require them to exercise capacities for resilience. Institutions of higher education have an important role to play, both in helping young people develop these capacities and removing systematic barriers that stand in their way. So what they want to do is help students overcome barriers and help them do this. So this goes to show that there's an interest. These are the top schools, and now it's so popular, other institutions have created it. So there is definitely room for resiliency training. All right, moving right along now. What strategies can advisors use? And mine is running out, so I'm going to go really super. And our students with the situations and so forth. But many times they're going through events or situations that can be challenging, but we can't change them. And so we need to give them a new perspective. So one of the best and easiest ways we could do that is reframe the situation. And let's see. So in practice, COVID, I had a lot of students come in and they're like, oh my gosh, I had to do online learning. I don't know how to do this. This is so hard, you know? And so one way, we couldn't change COVID and we couldn't change online learning. So one way was to let them know, hey, guess what? You were learning adaptability, yeah, I cannot say it, flexibility. And these are lifelong skills. And just think what you are accomplishing. They were forced to do it, but they're learning it. And they were like, yeah, I am learning it. Online learning, that is a skill. That is something that they can use. And technology skills, employers are looking at it. And as we change the what they were doing and accomplishing, they're like, oh yeah. So we didn't necessarily change their situation. Another thing that we talked about is what could you do with online learning? So if a student was having a hard time, giving them practical strategies to do well in online learning. So another strategy that I love is the power of yet. This is so simple and yet so powerful. And Carol Dweck, she shares a story about this. And she went to a high school in Chicago where students had to pass a certain number of classes to graduate. But if they didn't pass a course, they received a grade of not yet. And she continues and she says, I thought this was fantastic because if you get a failing grade, you think I'm nothing, I'm nowhere, I can't do anything, I'm a failure. But if you get the grade not yet, you understand that you are on a learning curve. It gives you a path into the future. And I love that. And so probably many of us have students who come in and and one common thing is, I'm not very good at math. I can't do math. Math is really hard. And you can say, not yet. You're not good at math yet. Or you can change it. There's a lot of different classes that you can do that. You know, many majors have different classes that are required. So it could be anatomy, it could be chemistry. But what I love about it is words can affect confidence. The words not or not yet give kids greater confidence and give them a path into the future. And it creates greater persistence. So you can turn a challenge into an opportunity. It helps with control negative self-talk and empowered thinking. Okay, sorry. Focus on what a student can control. When faced with a crisis or problem, it can be easy to get overwhelmed by things that feel far beyond your control. Instead of wishing there was some way you could go back in time or change things, try focusing only on the things that you can directly impact. And so this is such a great tool for students to learn how to do this. In spring of 2021, preparing for it. So it was actually in the registration season during the fall. I had a lot of students who were coming in and I just felt like I would try to give them to talk and so forth. And normally I'm really proud of my ability to get to know my students, get them to talk about their future, their goals, but they wanted me to tell them what to do. And I was like, what? And I was a really slow study in regard to that. But I think I kind of, after a while, I kind of figured out, oh, I think there's so much uncertainty in their life and they don't know how to plan far out. They don't want to because they don't know if it's going to happen. So instead, I started changing my approach when I was visiting with a student to do small attainable goals. And in exploratory advising, a lot of times they need to learn about what their interests are, how does that amount to a career and so forth. So I would have them go to the career services and take a focus 2 aptitude test that matches them with current majors at Utah State University in careers. I design actionable steps. Okay, you know, maybe shadow a person and so forth. And then I'd always have assignments that require follow-up. One thing that really surprised me about this exercise, one, they felt empowered. I did start getting more dialogue and more interaction. So I think the fact that their life maybe felt a little out of control So those small goals and actionable steps were huge. But that assignment to follow up, one thing that I really found useful was the fact that it really developed relationships. It's huge, and I don't think I did it very much in the past, but that has been really crucial for me. And not only does it help with accountability, but it also develops deep relationships. All right, it looks like my time has run out, but one thing I want to leave with you is that resilience can be learned. Investing the time will have a long-lasting impact on students of all ages, delivering lifelong benefits. Thank you.
Thanks, Annette. We actually have plenty of time to do some question and answers. We don't have any currently in the chat, but if you guys would like to ask any questions about the presentation today or make any comments, please feel free to add to the Q&A and we'll share that with our presenter. And Annette, we still have about 15 minutes, so if there's any additional information that you'd like to add for your presentation, you're welcome to do that as well.
Okay. Oh, well, I was flying through this because I thought I was out of time, so maybe I will talk about expressive writing then. So this is another strategy, and man, I wish I hadn't flown through all the other stuff too so fast, but this one is an interesting one because I'm gonna go back to this. When something bad happens, we usually reflect over it and we ruminate and we're like, oh my gosh, this is so bad and awful and everything. But there's this exercise of expressive writing, and where you examine something that you're going, something that's hard for you or something that's challenging you, and you can write about it for 20 minutes. And what actually happens is you start crafting your own narrative and you start gaining a sense of control around it. So, but it is different than just randomly writing. And so the nice thing about it is a student can kind of confront something that they're doing, what's happening in their life in regard to it. Now, again, in a 30-minute appointment, it's so hard to implement so many of these things. And so this one, though, you don't have to do anything, and you don't have to feel qualified. You just let them know about this kind of exercise. But a 1988 study found that participants who did expressive writing for 4 days were healthier 6 weeks later and happier up to 3 months later than when compared to people who wrote about superficial topics. In writing, the researchers suggest we're forced to confront ideas one by one, give them a structure which may lead to new perspectives, and you're crafting that new narrative. Another thing that you can do, and what happens usually is students usually come and they're like, what can I do? Give me some strategies. How can I do better, you know, and so forth. And so this is just a resource that you can tell them about and give to them, and then they actually do it on their own. But students are always so grateful. They always want tools, and this is a good takeaway. Another one that I like to do and talk students through is, like, if they've gone through something that's hard, and ask them, well, how did you overcome something that was really hard for you? Or what was something that you've done and what resources did you use? So then they reflect back on what they've done, and they're like, oh, and they come up with their own things and ideas. And so we just kind of talk about it, and they're like, oh, and they realize that they're capable of overcoming hard things because they've done it in the past. And then you apply it to, okay, what is that hard thing you're doing? So maybe you're having a hard time in Math 1050. So tell me, what's happening? Why is it so hard? What are some resources you can do? What could we do to make it the situation better? And they can write about that. And the amazing thing is they can come up with so many things. And usually, again, you can just assign them to go home and do it. Now, another little twist to this is the fact that you can also, after you've written about something that's hard or that's negative or that's an obstacle for them, you can switch it and you can do a silver linings component to it. And this is where you find something that's been hard for you or upsetting, and then you try to list 3 positive things that you've learned about the situation. So, for example, if a student was having a roommate crisis and they were fighting with their roommate, most of the time they can kind of come up with some things like they say, you know, it allows me that I need to communicate better. And also the problem helped me learn something about a different point of view or something. There's usually something something that they can learn about it. And so that, again, changes the conversation a little bit. One thing about writing about silver linings is a 2014 study indicates that practicing daily for 3 weeks helped participants become more engaged with life afterwards, and they were less pessimistic. But it does wear off after 2 months. So we also realize that we have to continually be working on our resiliency skills and so forth. So again, this one is probably not as easily done in the office setting, but it's a good one to talk through and help students to, when they're like, what can I do, and so forth. Yes, and I'm going to share, in practice, what you can do is you can tell them that they could use a notebook, and it doesn't have to be expensive or anything. They can do consistent timing, so maybe the certain time of day, they can schedule it in, and they can share some of their feelings with a trusted person, and then again, find some silver linings on that. Since we have some time, there's a video I would like to share. And the reason I want to share this video now, this video illustrates the fact that so we've been talking about the power of resiliency, the science of resiliency. It works and it can make a difference. But the one thing that this presentation hasn't shown is the fact that the people we're talking about are students, and students are people, and we want to give students as much power as they can. I have a video, and this was shown on KSL about 3 weeks ago. It's about a high school student, so it's not even a high school student, and it's not necessarily on academics or anything. It's just a story about a resilient student who, to me, it just shows how powerful resiliency can be and how you can overcome so many things with the fact that if you have resiliency. So I want to share that with you right now. And hopefully technology is going to work. And we're going to go here. And tell me if it doesn't. And
this oceanside verbo is about to become the backdrop for an unforgettable vacation memory.
We have the audio, but not the actual video. Oh, there we go, Annette. Never mind. Okay.
Which is most important to you? Now, it's one of those questions most of us would have a hard time answering until you lose one.
Tonight, KSL's Mike Hendricks shares the story of an 18-year-old in Logan who's found a way to see the big picture in the middle of adversity.
Good legs. 2 nights a week, 4 months out of the year.
Hand drop.
This old pool in Hiram, Utah.
Okay, go.
Is home to one of the best high school water polo teams in the state.
Nice, get those elbows out. Come on, straight arms.
Cache Valley Kraken, with an offense that is straight up fire. And a defense.
That's good defense. That's good defense.
Oh, maybe even better. See that guy there in the cage blocking all those shots?
Nice. Good job, Benjamin.
That's Benjamin Lennig, 6'3" and a wingspan nearly just as long. This kid is good at treading water almost half his life.
Okay, 5 seconds. Push it. Get those hips up.
But here's the thing about life. Whether it's in the pool or out of the water, in the middle of it all, there are simply some things you just never see coming.
So I see a young man walking out with a cane. Was he just in my pool? Was he part of this practice? I just blurted out, I have a blind goalie.
All right, I'm going to take you back about 10 years ago to a moment now seared in the memory of Benjamin and his mother.
When he was 8, we were walking home one night and he could not, I was pointing out constellations to him and he couldn't see the stars.
Sometimes I would say, like, I can't see the stars, Mom. I've never seen the stars.
Benjamin was losing his night vision, or at least that's what they thought.
Look at high.
But when they met with the eye doc a few years later,
And over to the left.
the diagnosis
Down.
dramatically changed.
And the doctor at that point set us down and said, we're not going to do contacts today. In fact, your son's going blind
That's a difficult conversation to have.
Dr. Kirk Winward is Benjamin's eye doctor.
Look right here at my ear.
And in that conversation said the words.
So Ben has an ocular condition called retinitis pigmentosa.
When you first heard those words, what did you think?
What is this?
In short, retinitis pigmentosa causes cells in the eye to die and degenerate. The initial effect is tunnel vision. The long-term effect,
Like you're looking through a telescope almost sometimes.
well, that tunnel gradually closes in.
You and I have probably close to 180 degrees of visual field, and Ben is down to about 30.
And if you're curious what that looks like in the everyday world, it's a lot like this. Walking the street, climbing the stairs, driving the... Wait a second, what?
Got out of the car and whipped out his blind cane, and everybody's mouth just dropped.
Yeah, he doesn't drive anymore, but here's the thing so difficult to understand.
That's you! That's you!
With his peripheral vision almost gone,
36.
and balls flying at 40 miles an hour, how in the world does this kid stop something that all too often
And when they bring the ball up, that's this very distinct noise.
he cannot even see?
I asked him one day, I said, how are you blocking those shots? I know some of them you can't see. And he says, well, I kind of just listen where the ball is.
He describes that he can hear the ball leave the player's hand, and then he's able to just kind of track it, almost like an echolocation.
Position myself in a way that either one arm, both my arms, or my face gets it.
Frankly, I don't know how he does it, but he's definitely in the top tier goalies of the state.
Now that's Benjamin's oldest brother, Brian.
Without a doubt, I would say he's one of the best.
And this is Jared.
Is he better than you?
Let's move on for that one.
He's big brother number 2. Both of them former all-state goalies and coaching Benjamin since he was young.
Hands on the wall. We're doing egg beater.
And the fact he's just about legally blind
Hey, 5 seconds. Keep going. Keep going.
has never kept them from pushing his limits. Limits tested just a few weeks ago
5 shooters on each side. This is an exciting time. Let's get it.
when a tied-up game was forced into a one-on-one shootout.
Be interesting to see what they do here.
The announcer was talking about how during the shootout, he was listening to the other coach from the other team saying, hey, you need to shoot snake eyes on him. It's like, look one direction and shoot the other.
He said both snake eyes on the fire.
And I'm like, that's not going to work on Benjamin because he doesn't know where you're looking. He can't see your eyes.
Direct fits to fire now against Benjamin Lanick.
An entire game coming down to just 5 shots. That right there.
Pitch line wins the game.
Yeah, that block was the game winner.
And Benjamin's just like, nope, not going to happen.
Benjamin Lanick, amazing job. Ridgeline takes it 9-8.
You're always waiting for that next shoe to drop, right? What's the limits of his abilities? How fast is it progressing? He just seems to keep finding ways to cope with it.
Tests have shown Benjamin is losing more than 1 degree of peripheral vision each and every year. He's now at 27 degrees, and while there is no cure, there are also no limits he is allowed to find him. He's a runner, he's a worker, he's a rower, he's a builder, he's the kind of kid who smiles even after the doctor slides a needle in his eye.
In some ways, his growing blindness has also made him more independent.
And he's the kind of kid who sees the world in a way many of us probably should.
It makes me really proud of him.
A proud father who on this night and at this pool
Right side, right side, right side.
is watching with the rest of this hometown crowd as Benjamin protects goal
Good play.
one last time. No, they're not watching a charity case, and he's no novelty act.
Good.
I have full sight. I can't even block him.
But with nearly 400 blocks in Benjamin's high school career,
He's probably the best goalie I've seen in all my years playing water polo.
well, you may be looking at the best in the state.
Good 2 quarters.
And the beauty of it all isn't necessarily the reaction.
They're like, wait, what?
People on the other side are like, wait, what? Like,
When opposing teams see that cane,
Another team just is like, wait, he's blind, and we just got wrecked by him.
it's the fact this 18-year-old forced to deal with something nobody ever saw coming
I've seen the things I want to see. I've seen with my family. I've seen my friends.
can somehow see far beyond what's in front of him.
It can go any time. It can go tomorrow, next year, 50 years from now. I feel like I'm prepared for it to just go.
Mike Hedrick reporting. The teams haven't been announced yet, but Benjamin's coach expects he will make All-State, and there's a chance, he says, Benjamin could be the MVP.
Wow, amazing. Stop
Hold
doing
on. Trying to get
You're
out of
good.
here.
this. Sounds
Thanks so much, Jeanette, for sharing that. We're actually at the very end of our conference time now. No new questions came in, but we really appreciate and value your time. And do you just have any closing remarks before we head out?
The Science of Resiliency works, and I think that we need to develop resiliency in our students, and I appreciate everything that you guys do as advisors, and that you have a terrific ability to empower your students. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, and we'll see you guys all in the next hour for the keynote speaker. Have a great day.
Thank you.
right. Believe it or not, it's actually true.